You're having a get together at your home, family and friends are there, and you're having a wonderful time. Suddenly, you realize you don't recognize some of the people there, how they get there. Maybe they're friends of friends that you invited. Crash! A commotion in the other room. You go to investigate and find a room full of rowdy people that are drunk that could hardly even stand on their own. When you ask them to depart your residency, they say they have the right to be here, and they'll leave if and when they decide. When you call the authorities, they inform you there's nothing they can do. This is a pretty scary scenario, but it's what's happening in our home every day. Our home we call the US of A. Ladies and gentlemen, today I'm going to talk about our home, the USA, and our legal and illegal immigration problem in our homeland. In researching this subject, I have found that when you stick to the basics, it's very easy to understand why more immigration control is needed. The majority of the arguments put forth by the opponents of immigration reform are far from the basis of the argument. Today, I'm going to take this argument back to the basics. If asked, most people believe that we've had very open immigration policies in the United States. Most people envision the days of Ellis Island and think that we've had continuous immigration since then. This leads people to think that it would be inhumane or against the vision of who we are to stop or further curtail or regulate immigration into the United States. I think there are a lot of lessons to be learned in history, and I want to share some history with you now. From the 1880s to the 1920s, we had seen a flood of immigrants into the country, and we took the time to assimilate them. They wanted to be Americans and to assimilate. They did not forget their native cultures. They held on to their cultures, and they lived in neighborhoods, but they wanted to be Americans. They knew that being an American, what it meant to be an American compared to where they had lived or where they had come from. They wanted everything about America that they could get, and they wanted to work hard for it. Did you know that immigration was practically suspended in the early 1920s? From 1921 until 1965, we had very limited immigration. In 1921, Congress passed a stopgap immigration measure for the sole purpose of slowing the flood of immigrants entering the United States. In 1924, President Coolidge signed a more thorough law that limited immigrants entering the United States to 2% of the total of any given nation's residents in the United States. It also completely excluded immigrants from Asia. Then in 1927, the 2% rule was replaced by an overall cap of 150,000 immigrants annually. Ultimately, this law was abolished, but it was not until 1965 with the Hart-Celler Act abolishing the national origins quota system that had structured America's immigration policy for over 40 years. As illustrated on this slide, you can see over here is the number of immigrants. The different colors are the different countries that they originated from, and you can see the timeline. You can see here that from in the 1920s until the mid-60s area, how limited or how small immigration was. Then it eventually came back out, and then after 1965, it has exploded into what we have today. So you may be asking why immigration was curtailed in the early 1920s for 40 plus years. And would you be surprised to learn that one of the reasons was terrorist attacks? There were groups of terrors committed in the United States, mostly from groups or so-called anarchist groups. For instance, In September 6, 1901, President William McKinley was assassinated by an anarchist in Buffalo, New York. And in the early 1900s, there was a number of bombings and bombing attempts committed by these anarchists. Any of this sound familiar? Let's say the Paris attacks. Some people don't want to create the impression that we are reaching new depths, that the United States is seeking to new lows, and that it's a terrible shame what's happening because of the right-wing bigotry, of the closed-mindedness of all that exists in our country. When the fact is, for over 41 years, we've had very controlled and limited immigration. The idea of stopping or curtailing immigration is an idea that many Americans support today and is actually traditionally American. It is part of our history and our culture to regulate immigration and to maintain safety for our citizens. Coincidentally, statistically, non-Americans commit over 5 times more serious crimes per capita than Americans. It is estimated that there are more than 130,000 foreign criminals in prison and jails in the United States. And add in an additional 170,000 convicted criminal immigrants who have final orders of removal, i.e. deportation, but who remain at large in the United States, and another 180,000 convicted criminal aliens with deportation cases pending, but who are also at large. And we have a total non-American felon population of over 480,000. That number is the size of our 35th largest city, Sacramento, California, and bigger than the entire population of each Atlanta, Kansas City, Oklahoma, Miami, Minneapolis, and many more. Looking at it another way, illegal aliens constitute 27% of the federal prison population. This means that a group that comprises of less than 5% of the population nationally is committing 27% of the federal crimes. Let's look at the stats on the Syrian refugees. The latest updated figures of Syrian refugees admitted into the United States since the Syrian civil war began, only 53, or 2.4% of the 2,200 total, are Christians. That statistic by itself may not be alarming, but when you add in the fact that Syrians' population breakdown is 90% Muslim and 10% Christian, why are these statistics so far off kilter? 10% of Syrians are Christian, but only 2% of the refugees are Christians? That's a tough one. Let's take a look at one of the arguments of illegal immigration. The 14th Amendment gives people born in the United States the entitlement of being a U.S. citizen. Wow, that's what we hear every time this subject comes up. Again, let's take the argument back to the basics rather than listening to the narrative. Let's actually do the research, open the facts, and look at the 14th Amendment and the history that went into it. Actually, the interpretation of the Citizenship Clause, now used to grant automatic citizenship to children of 2 parents who are illegal aliens, is unconstitutional. Section 1 of the 14th Amendment states, all persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States and of the state wherein they reside. Most people would agree with the basic concept of birthright citizenship as plainly stated in the first part of this clause. But in addition to the requirement that requires a child to be born on American soil, it's the plain reading of the Citizenship Clause also adds another requirement. The and subject to jurisdiction thereof part. As we all know, there are no unneeded clauses in the tightly drafted document we call the United States Constitution. The intent of the framers was crystal clear. The purpose of this amendment was to overturn the Dred Scott case and ensure guaranteed citizenship to all former black slaves born in America and likely living here for generations. At the same time, they wanted to limit the citizenship to those subject to our jurisdiction, which excludes those that are not legally permanent residents of this country and certainly illegal aliens. The 1866 Civil Rights Act, which was the forerunner of the 14th Amendment, reads as follows. All persons born in the United States and not subject to any foreign power, excluding Indians not taxed, are hereby declared to be citizens of the United States. Anyone who is here illegally or on a temporary visa is still subject to the jurisdictions of his or her home country of origin. Senator Jacob Howard of Michigan, the principal author of the Citizenship Clause of the 14th Amendment, explicitly said, candidates for citizens must be born here and not owe allegiance to another authority. He made it clear that allegiance will not, of course, include persons born in the United States who are foreigners, aliens who belong to families of ambassadors or foreign ministers accredited to the government of the United States. If we can be sure that even the children of Indian tribes was excluded from the automatic citizenship, certainly temporary visitors from foreign countries were meant not to be included. Let's look at the participation rate of the United States when it comes to immigration. According to a 2013 UN report, 19.2% of immigrants worldwide reside in the United States. There are 196 countries in the world that make the United States. 0.05 of those countries in the world would be the United States. In short, that means that 19.2% of all immigrants live in 0.05% of the countries. On the slide here depicts the individual countries, and the countries are bigger as depending upon the number of people they take in. Another way of looking at this is on average, the United States takes 400% more immigrants than other countries. In closing, I would like to say there's no shame in believing that the U.S. should take more actions to limit immigration. The U.S. as a country has done more than anyone else. Yes, this is a very controversial subject. The opponents of immigration want it that way. They know that the more people naturally avoid conflict, the more controversial that they can make about the subject, regardless of what it's about, the more people will shy away from it. Don't wait for immigration problem to come to your neighborhood and is knocking on your door. Don't be told what to think. Do your own research. Get involved. Your family's security may just depend upon it. Thank you and have a good day.